My name is Lily, and I'm 29. I've lived my entire life under a roof that never had a room for me. My father is the kind of man people admire from the outside. He wore leadership like a tailored suit, crisp, polished, commanding. A regional manager at a logistics firm, he knew how to run numbers, negotiate deals, and lead teams. But at home, he led with silence, at least when it came to me. I had two older brothers, Caleb and Nathan, and to Dad, they were walking proof of his legacy. Caleb was the star quarterback in high school, complete with scholarships and varsity jackets. Nathan was the genius kid who built drones and won robotics fairs. Our house was practically a shrine to their achievements. Framed jerseys, trophies on every shelf, science fair medals hanging in the hallway. And then there was me. I was the quiet one who read under the stairs, the one who painted birds and dreamed of writing stories. I never broke records or brought home hardware. I brought silence. I brought softness. I brought things that couldn't be quantified or displayed at a dinner party. Dad didn't know what to do with that. When I got into college on a merit scholarship, he didn't even attend the award ceremony. Liberal arts? He'd scoffed. Great, so you'll be broke with opinions. I laughed it off at the time, but it stuck in me like a splinter. I graduated summa cum laude. He didn't show up. Said Caleb's wife was going into labor, and he had to be there for family. Funny, I wasn't considered family then. Still, I tried. I showed up to holidays, with gifts he barely unwrapped. I brought dishes to barbecues he never complimented. Once, I gave him a signed copy of my debut novel. He left it on the kitchen counter like junk mail. I used to think I just wasn't enough, not strong enough, not smart enough, not loud enough. But as I got older, I realized it wasn't me. It was the lens he looked through. It had no space for daughters who weren't built like sons. Mom tried to bridge the gap, always with gentle hands and tired eyes. She'd squeeze my hand under the table whenever Dad cut me off. One night, when I was 12, she whispered while tucking me in. "Sweetheart, some men were never taught how to love their daughters. It's not your job to teach them." Back then, I didn't understand. Now I know she was apologizing for him in the only way she knew how. When she died of a stroke 3 years ago, it felt like my last ally left the battlefield. After that, I stopped trying to be seen. It was like I'd gone from invisible to completely erased. Then came his retirement. When I got the invitation to Dad's retirement party, I stared at it for a long time, not because I didn't expect it. Caleb and Nathan had been talking it up for months. They planned the whole thing like it was a Super Bowl event. Rented a banquet hall, hired a caterer, even had a slideshow of his greatest hits at work. My name was on the invite, but let's be honest, it was a courtesy. One of those "we invited her so she won't complain later" kind of gestures. I almost threw it away, almost. But something stopped me. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was that restless part of me that still, after everything, wondered if he'd say anything, just one thing, that made me feel like I had ever really been part of his story. I decided to go, not to celebrate him, not to be polite. I went because I needed to close a door that had been half open my whole life. I arrived late on purpose, 10 minutes past the posted time, just enough to avoid the greetings, the awkward hugs, the small talk with people who only remembered me as Paul's daughter, the one who writes or teaches or something. The room was packed. Ex-coworkers, family members I hadn't seen in years, people I vaguely recognized from church potlucks and Christmas cards. There were congratulations balloons, a buffet with shrimp cocktails, a chocolate fountain, even a slideshow looping old work photos where Dad looked like a corporate hero. I took a seat in the back by the emergency exit. Fitting. Caleb went first. His speech was full of charm and stories about Dad's tenacity, how he'd coached Caleb's little league team while still managing a full sales territory. Nathan followed with a more technical speech, charts and anecdotes about how Dad taught him leadership through problem solving. The crowd laughed, applauded, toasts were made. People cheered like they were at a wedding. Then my father stepped up to the mic. He looked older than I remembered, still sturdy, still commanding, but there was a weariness behind his eyes. He adjusted the microphone like he'd done it 1,000 times in boardrooms. And then he smiled, that smug, familiar smile. "I owe it all to my sons," he said, spreading his arms. "Caleb, Nathan, you're the reason I got up every morning. You gave me purpose. You made me proud. You have what it takes." He paused. "And my daughter," he gave a half shrug, that dismissive gesture I knew too well. Well, not everyone is built for greatness, but I guess someone has to watch from the sidelines. Laughter, not loud, but enough to sting, enough to echo. I stood up, not fast, not angry, calm. So calm it almost frightened me. The room hushed. A few heads turned. Caleb looked confused. Nathan gave me a small, nervous smile. Kay knew this moment had been boiling for decades. I walked down the aisle like I was walking through fog. I could feel every heartbeat in my fingertips. When I reached the front, I pulled a small box from my purse, wrapped in dark blue paper, tied with a silver ribbon. I handed it to him. "From your biggest disappointment," I said quietly, but clear enough that the front rows heard. I looked him in the eyes and smiled. "Sweet. Was for me." Not out of spite, but peace. He took the box, bewildered. "Lily," but I was already turning, already walking away. I didn't grab cake. I didn't look back. I stepped into the parking lot like I was stepping into a new life. And for the first time in years, the air didn't feel heavy. What was in the box? Not a bomb, not a confrontation. Just the truth. By the time I reached my car, my hands were trembling. Not from nerves, those had passed. What I felt was something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. Release. Not relief, not revenge. Just the quiet hum of finally letting go. I sat behind the wheel for a few minutes, watching the party lights through the rearview mirror. Somewhere inside, my father was still holding that box, probably thinking it was a book, or maybe some symbolic jab. He always assumed I was being dramatic when I spoke up for myself, but it wasn't meant to wound him. The box held two things. The first was a letter. I'd written it a year ago, late at night, when grief for my mother and resentment toward my father collided like a storm. I'd never intended to send it back then. It was just a way to breathe, a way to get the weight out of my chest and onto paper. The second was a photograph, a small, slightly faded picture tucked inside a wooden frame. In it, I was maybe 6 years old, sitting on Dad's lap. Mom sat beside us, her arms wrapped around my waist. We were on the back porch, and all three of us were smiling like the world had nothing sharp in it yet. It was the last photo where I felt like I belonged between them. I had sealed the letter, and the photo together in a wooden case and kept it on my bookshelf. I didn't even plan to bring it to the party until the night before. Something told me, if he's going to bury the past, make sure he sees what he's burying. That letter wasn't a guilt trip. It wasn't even a defense. It was an account. I told him about the scholarship he never acknowledged, the thesis that won a national award, the kids I now taught in underfunded schools who told me my class was the only place they felt seen, the novel I published that got picked up for screenwrites last fall. I told him about the nonprofit I started in Mom's name, funding creative education for girls in low-income communities. I told him how it began with the inheritance Mom left me, and how I knew she'd be proud. I wrote, I didn't send this to change your mind. I wrote it to remind myself that I've always been enough. Even when you didn't look up. At the bottom of the page, beneath my signature, I added one line. You lost your daughter a long time ago. All you ever had to do was see her. 2 hours later, Nathan called. His voice was panicked, like someone had pulled the ground out from under him. Lily, what the hell was in that box? I didn't answer right away. He continued, breath ragged. Dad opened it in front of everyone. He started shouting your name. Hedge, remember? That nickname he gave you when you used to hide in the bushes at Mom's garden. I did remember. I hadn't heard it in over a decade. He started yelling, Hey, Hedge, come back. Come back here. Nathan paused. He looked wrecked, like something cracked. I kept my voice even. Did he cry? There was a long silence. Then quietly, yeah, he did. The next morning, my phone was a war zone. 31 missed calls, mostly from extended family. A few from Caleb, calling me a selfish brat. One from a second cousin asking, was that really necessary? But there was one voicemail I played more than once. My Aunt Carla, Mom's sister. Lily, she said, her voice shaking. I've never seen your father look like that. You didn't humiliate him. You showed him the mirror. You didn't break him, honey. You just showed him what he broke. I'm proud of you. I sat on the edge of my bed after listening to that message. The photo now propped on my nightstand. There was no pride in what I did, no glory, no triumph, just truth. And that truth didn't explode like a firework. It settled like a stone in the water, sending out ripples that no one in that room saw coming. By Monday morning, the family group chat looked like a crime scene. The first message came from Caleb, a 5-paragraph monologue disguised as a heartfelt concern. He called my act calculated, malicious, and embarrassing. Said I had sabotaged a moment meant to honor Dad's legacy. He even threw in something about Mom rolling in her grave, which was rich, coming from a man who hadn't visited her grave since the funeral. He ended it with, we were all willing to move on, but you clearly still have a chip on your shoulder. Grow up, Lily. Nathan chimed in next, more diplomatic but still a scolding. He said he understood my pain but wished I'd handled it privately. That word, privately, hit a nerve. Privately, like all the years I spent swallowing disappointment in silence. Like all the family dinners where I sat smiling while Dad ignored me. Like when I got my first period and had to ask my school nurse for help because Mom was away and Dad told me to Google it. Privately. That's how they preferred their shame. Unseen, unspoken, undisturbed. I didn't reply. I didn't explain. I didn't ask for understanding. Instead, I did something they didn't expect. I left the group. No final words, no drama, just left. 3 hours later, I got a message from my father. It was just one line. "What do you want from me?" I stared at it for a long time, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the urge to answer right away. I didn't feel like I needed to fix anything. I didn't feel guilty. What did I want? I used to want acknowledgement, a smile, a question about my day, a good job when I did something I was proud of. Hell, I used to practice what I'd say if he ever asked me about my book, just in case the moment came. But that version of me, the little girl waiting to be seen, was long gone. So finally I typed back, "Nothing, not anymore." I hit send, and that was that, or so I thought. 3 days later, I came home from work to find a certified envelope sticking out of my mailbox. My heart flipped. I thought it might be legal, an inheritance dispute, maybe even a lawsuit. That wouldn't have surprised me at this point, but when I opened it, what? Well, my hands froze. It wasn't from a lawyer. It was from Dad, typed, of course. Never one for handwriting, unless it was a check or a grocery list. The tone was clipped, but there was a hesitation between the lines, like someone trying to translate regret into a language they've never spoken. "I read your letter a dozen times. At first, I thought you were trying to hurt me, but now I think you were trying to show me something I refused to see. Your mother always told me I was blind when it came to you. I thought she was exaggerating. Maybe I just didn't want to believe I was that kind of father. You didn't need me to become who you are, but I wish I'd been man enough to be part of it. I've started reading your book, and I cried when I saw the dedication to your mother. You were never my failure. I was yours." That last line, I had to read it twice. I didn't cry. I didn't throw the letter away either. I just sat on the couch and let the words settle into me, like soft ash. There was no fixing the past, no redoing the missed birthdays, the skipped ceremonies, the hollow silences. But for the first time in my life, he wasn't rewriting the story. He was telling the truth. And that, somehow, mattered more than an apology ever could. A week passed in uneasy quiet. I thought the worst was over, that I had stepped off the stage and the curtain had finally fallen on this family's performance. But then came lunch with my cousin Monica. We were sitting outside a cafe, splitting fries and gossiping about a girl we used to hate in high school who'd just become an influencer for some protein shake brand. It was light, easy, until Monica leaned in, voice lowered. "Did you hear about the will?" I blinked. "What will?" "Your dad's. Caleb and Nathan tried to get him to cut you out of it." I almost choked on my iced tea. "Excuse me?" "Right after the retirement party, they confronted him, said you were manipulating him, that the letter and the box were just a guilt trap to get money." I let out a hollow laugh, not because it was funny, but because it was so predictable. Of course they would. Of course they'd rather believe I was scheming than accept that their golden boy image of our father had cracks. Monica leaned in closer. "But here's the thing. Your dad didn't listen. Not this time. He told them he'd seen the truth too late. But he wasn't going to die, pretending he hadn't seen it at all." I sat frozen, the noise of the cafe blurring into background static. "He rewrote the will, equal shares to all three of you," she said. "And he's making a donation to your foundation, in Mom's name." My throat tightened. The man who once scoffed at my nonprofit, called it another emotional vanity project, was now funding it. I didn't know what to feel. Relief, validation, anger that it took this long, maybe all of it, maybe none. 2 nights later, my phone rang. It was him. I almost didn't answer, but something, maybe curiosity, maybe some tiny flicker of that little girl who used to sit by the stairs, hoping he'd notice her, made me press accept. His voice was rough, lower than I remembered. "Lily, I don't expect us to be close. I've made too many mistakes, but would you be open to lunch? No expectations, just to talk. You don't owe me anything. I'd just like to listen." I didn't speak for a long time. Then I said, on one condition, anything. You don't get to tell people I forgave you. You don't get to frame this like some heartwarming ending. This isn't a movie. There was a pause, then a dry chuckle. Fair enough. We met at a small diner Mom used to love, the kind with vinyl booths, chipped mugs, and jukeboxes that still worked. I got there early, out of habit, sat in a corner booth where the light hit just right, and ordered coffee I wouldn't drink. He walked in 5 minutes late. He looked smaller than I remembered, not physically, but like something in him had collapsed. Like he wasn't carrying his pride in his chest anymore. He didn't try to hug me, didn't force a smile. He just slid into the booth and said, "This place smells like her." We talked for almost 2 hours about Mom, about her garden, about how she used to sing when she cooked, and how none of us appreciated it then. He asked me about the foundation, about the kids we were helping, about the schools we'd partnered with. I told him stories, not to impress him, but because he finally asked. We didn't talk about the party. We didn't talk about the box. We didn't need to. When the check came, he pushed it toward me and said, "I want you to keep the photo." I frowned. "You gave it back." "I know, but you're the only one in that picture who remembers who we used to be." I took it, and for the first time in my life, he didn't ask for a second chance. He just let the moment be what it was. Not forgiveness, not repair. Just two people sitting in the wreckage of what could have been, and finally seeing each other. We'll never have the relationship I once dreamed about. There's too much distance, too many years where I was the invisible girl at the edge of the table. But something shifted that day. Something broke open, and maybe, just maybe, that gift I gave him wasn't for him at all. Maybe it was for me. The act of standing up, of saying the thing no one had ever dared to say in that family. It wasn't vengeance, it wasn't drama, it was truth. And sometimes the loudest scream isn't a sound, it's the silence you leave behind. And in that silence, he finally heard me. I kept the photo on my desk, not in a frame, just propped against my lamp, slightly curled at the edges. Mom, Dad, and me on the porch. A moment frozen in a time I barely remember, but still ache for. Sometimes I catch myself staring at it while grading papers or planning a new workshop for the foundation. I don't stare because I'm nostalgic. I stare because I'm reclaiming it. That photo used to haunt me. Proof that once he held me like I mattered. Proof that it wasn't always cold glances and passing comments. But now it's not about proof, it's about closure. After that lunch at the diner, we didn't become close. There were no weekly calls, no father-daughter road trips. He didn't suddenly start quoting my book or asking for my favorite color. We're not a Hallmark movie, but once a month, he sends a donation to the foundation. No note, no expectations, just a quiet acknowledgement that I exist and that what I do matters. That's more than I thought I'd ever get. Caleb hasn't spoken to me since the will was finalized. He posted some cryptic Facebook rant about people weaponizing trauma for attention. I didn't respond. I don't owe him my peace. Nathan texted once, just a photo of Dad at one of our events, standing in the back of the room, watching a group of girls present their art. The caption read, "He stayed the whole time." I didn't reply, but I saved the photo. People talk a lot about breaking cycles, about healing, about forgiving and moving on. But they rarely talk about how complicated it really is. How healing doesn't always look like reconciliation. Sometimes it looks like distance, boundaries, choosing not to return to the fire, even if someone says they've put it out. I didn't forgive my father because he earned it. I didn't reconnect with him to fix him. I simply told the truth, out loud, in a room that never wanted to hear it. And something in me shifted. The girl who used to whisper apologies for taking up space, she's gone. The woman who stood up at that party and handed her father the truth, she's still learning how to live with that voice. But she's not afraid of it anymore. Last week, I gave a talk at a youth conference. The theme was Voices That Matter. I almost turned it down. Public speaking still makes my palms sweat. But I went. At the end of my speech, a teenage girl with oversized glasses and paint-stained jeans came up to me. She didn't say much, just handed me a folded piece of paper. It said, "Thank you for showing me I'm allowed to speak, even when they don't listen." I smiled. That was it. That's what the box was for. That's what the photo was for. That's what truth is for. Sometimes the stories we write aren't just for the people who hurt us. They're for the ones who are still learning how to not hurt themselves. And if even one of them finds her voice in the silence I left behind, then everything was worth it. I returned to the porch. Not the metaphorical one, the actual porch from that photograph. The wooden steps where I once sat between my parents, my hair in crooked braids, my cheeks sticky from melted popsicles. The boards had aged, the paint was peeling, but the view, that slow stretch of afternoon sun over the fence, it was the same. The house had been empty since Mom passed. Caleb wanted to sell it. Nathan didn't want to deal with it. Dad kept paying the property taxes but never went back. Until now, he asked me if I'd go with him, just once. Not to fix anything, not to clean out the attic or pick through old boxes, just to sit. I said yes. We didn't talk much, not at first. He brought thermoses of coffee, the kind Mom used to fill with too much cream. I brought a small speaker and played the jazz she liked when she gardened. We sat on opposite ends of the porch swing, the silence between us no longer hostile, just honest. Eventually he spoke. "She'd be proud of you, you know." I nodded. She always was. Another pause. "I think she knew I couldn't see you clearly, and I think she hoped time would fix that." He looked down at his hands, the same hands that used to hold me, then let me go without knowing it. "Time didn't fix it. You did." For once, I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I just took a deep breath and looked out at the garden where the wildflowers had returned, stubborn and untamed. Mom would have loved that. I asked him after a while if he regretted anything. He didn't say, "Of course." He didn't launch into a speech. He just nodded once and said, "I regret that I thought silence was strength." That stayed with me, not because it was profound, but because it was finally true. Later, before we left, I walked around the back of the house. The fence was still there, though one panel leaned like it had given up on standing straight. I ran my hand along the weathered wood and remembered hiding there, not from monsters, but from absence. That's what I had always wanted to name it. Not cruelty, not abuse, just absence, just a shape no one ever tried to fill. But I wasn't afraid of it anymore because I had built something beyond it. We locked the house and walked to our cars. He lingered, keys in hand. "Do you think you'll come back here?" I thought about it. Then I smiled. "Maybe, but not to remember you." He blinked. "Then why?" "To remember me." And with that, we drove off in different directions. Core values of the story. Even the quietest voices deserve to be heard. Lily didn't shout. She simply stood up and told the truth, something no one in her family had dared to do. In a world where silence is often mistaken for peace, she proved that truth doesn't have to be loud to echo deeply. Healing doesn't always mean forgiveness. This story doesn't end with a warm embrace or a perfect reconciliation. And that's okay. Sometimes healing means creating distance, setting boundaries, and walking away, not in anger, but in clarity. You don't have to become what your family values to be worthy of love. Lily found success on her own terms, not through trophies or traditional roles, but through creativity, empathy, and resilience. Her story challenges the belief that only certain achievements are valid, especially for daughters. The gift wasn't for him, it was for her. The box Lily gave her father wasn't meant to punish or shame. It was an act of release, a declaration that she no longer needed to prove anything. She didn't need his validation to know her worth. You can start the change, but it's not your job to fix everything. By speaking up, Lily ignited a ripple effect, but she didn't stay to manage the fallout. Her role was to tell the truth, not to carry the responsibility of everyone else's growth. And that, too, is power. Absence is a wound, even when no one talks about it. Just because something isn't violent doesn't mean it's not painful. Emotional neglect, dismissal, and being overlooked for years leave scars. Lily's story gives a name to that quiet ache and offers release.